Today we're going to talk about Brian Cohee. Now, this is going to be part one of a two-part series on this. So, Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Yeah, this is a dark little bastard. I'll just put it that way. We are going to enjoy doing two of these because this guy deserves whatever we say about him. It's a really interesting video. This guy was found guilty of murder in the first degree and sentenced to life plus 13 years in 2023. The rest of the story, he'll unfold for us.
What's going on, man?
Not much. Cooperate. I am going to cooperate.
Okay, so parents have some concerns of some stuff they may have found in your room?
Yeah, I believe so.
And what would it be?
A human head and hands.
Like, for real human head and hands?
Yes.
From?
That fellow who went missing recently.
Which fellow was that?
Warren Brown.
Warren Brown? When did he go missing?
The night of the 27th.
The night of the 27th? Okay, and how did you end up with him?
I murdered him.
With what?
A knife.
Why would you have done that?
I've always wondered what murder felt like.
Greg, what do you got?
So I'm going to use just a very quick one. This guy is proud of this. Look at his chin go up. More importantly, there's something we talk about all the time with psychopaths, but we can't demonstrate it. He just did. This is what glib looks like all day, every day. When you can talk about murdering somebody and cutting off their head and hands this casually and stick your head up in pride, that's glib. What do you got, Scott?
Yeah, I agree with you. This is good. I know I say this is one of my favorites, but this will probably be one of my favorites by the time we get to the end of the second edition of this, part two. But here in part one, and in this intro, it's almost like he's trying to be somebody else as he's saying what's happened. It's almost like he's proud of it, but at the same time, it's being so glib that really gets your attention. You go, wow, this is, because you always look at it and think, nah, he didn't do that. You know, it looks fake almost. He's so into delivering that information. But our brain says that information is so bizarre and so out of the norm that, you know, something's not right here. But it is right there, because we're seeing this is a grouping of psychological or psychiatric situations we're dealing with. We'll get into that later on. But this is a really interesting show we're doing here today on this guy. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so I think we've got a couple of versions of this guy here. We've got the first version where the guy in the background, I'm going to assume it's the father. The guy in the background says, cooperate. Yep. And it's very commanding tone. And he goes, I am going to cooperate. And we see his voice pitch up on the am. He performs there very much in almost a belligerent child way, which seems appropriate for the father, let's say, I'm assuming, being commanding at that point. And then he moves forward, quite stiff, very stiff in the upper torso there. Greg, that may be something about this puffed out chest but we'll see other elements that it might be about as we move through these videos, but a little bit stiff. So is that trepidation? That seems fair that it could be. Is that baseline for him? Too early to say, but then a very different tone around him talking about and admitting to the murder and the cutting off of the decapitation, which is yes, odd, as you both said, but also very different from the belligerent child that we had before. There's a turn on a dime there. Love the guy in the background, the hard head turn of revulsion at the back as he admits to that, maybe an element of disbelief and revulsion, but we do see the nose go first, also almost smelling something bad there. So great first video there. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, we really see a transition from archetypal boy to archetypal man. And that happens in this video. This kind of strutting, the arms even move away from the body. So this is exposing a little arteries kind of to be tough and challenging, chin coming up to be tough and challenging. And we may be seeing, maybe we're going to see evidence for this later, but we may be seeing somebody who has almost in their vision a pathological feeling of insignificance and being almost infantilized throughout their life. And now when this big break happens, they can break out of this little false life that they lived, and now I become significant. I have done something. He knows his name's going to go down in history, and this is a large feeling of significance for maybe a life that he spent in feeling insignificant for a very long period. His hands even come out of his pockets, so there's no more pacifying. So we see almost an increase in openness of his body when that starts coming out. And I think that's going to play out in the next few videos.
What's going on, man?
Not much. Cooperate. I am going to cooperate.
Okay, so parents have some concerns of some stuff they may have found in your room?
Yeah, I believe so.
And what would it be?
A human head and hands.
Like, for real human head and hands?
Yes.
From?
That fellow who went missing recently.
Which fellow was that?
Warren Brown.
Warren Brown? When did he go missing?
The night of the 27th.
The night of the 27th? Okay, and how did you end up with him?
I murdered him.
With what?
A knife.
Why would you have done that?
I've always wondered what murder felt like.
Somebody seeing you
Well,
or touching you?
It was 11 p.m.,
Okay.
so not many were driving by. Well, it was behind the pillar. So, like, here's the road.
Uh-huh.
It was here. So people would only see a brief thing here and here.
So, were you worried about them seeing you?
I was worried about one of them stopping. But
What did you think could happen if somebody...
well, it was quite dark under there, so they wouldn't have seen the guy unless they looked. They would have seen me holding a bloody 12-inch knife, wearing gloves, and wearing a mask to conceal my identity, face mask.
Okay. So you weren't doing it for COVID, you were doing it to hide your face?
Partially. Social distancing. Right. Yeah, but no one stopped, and I'm just like, proves the bystander effect.
I noticed you got a cut on your hand, is that from...
Oh, that was when I was doing gas, when I filled up. I mentioned I filled up gas when I was driving around.
Okay.
I was driving around, I was on a quarter of a tank, so I filled up on gas. What happened was, because I don't want to be seen in a gas station with a knife poking out of my pocket, I put it in the car, the back seat floor. When I'm done with it, I try and grab it, but my hand slips and grabs the blade, and as I pick it up, it slices these two fingers.
Okay.
Like,
Because a lot of times if you're stabbing, you're like this, it'll...
no, and they had a guard. It was one of those knives that was
What
like...
is it?
Huh? The
What
knife?
is it? Yeah.
My dad had it.
Okay.
He found it in my car. And then, let's see. Yeah. And then, after that, I stripped his clothes.
Mark, what do you got?
Have you ever Googled yourself and been shocked to see your personal information exposed on public listing sites? I just did a search of one of our upcoming subjects, and I was amazed to see the sensitive information exposed to me, what they earn, where they've been, and even where they live right now, and that's without even venturing onto the darknet. You see, data brokers are making a fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, and others who want to learn more about you, like where you live. Our sponsor, Aura, can identify data brokers exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Now, brokers are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do that. Aura can do the hard work for you. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats you can't see. It's easy to set up. You don't have to download several different apps to get things like parental controls, antivirus, VPN, password management, identity theft insurance, and more. You get everything at one affordable price. So let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online, and then you can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. Don't let people continue to exploit and profit off your private information. Go to aura.com/TBP and start your 2-week free trial. Link in the description below. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, interesting. So who have we got? Who have we got this time? We seem to have a different one this time. Very helpful. assertive tone lands hard at the end of every sentence or thought. So there's a new, well, we almost call it a disfluence there, a new cadence, a new stress that he's using, usually, as I say, at the end of every sentence, or a new thought. Again, to be assertive, to be helpful in this. This is very different from the speech pattern that we had before with him. Now, different context. So, of course, there's an opportunity there. Context will change a whole bunch of things there, but it is very odd. So it's atypical speech tone here. So could point to neurodivergence, could point to that. It's an option that we could think about at this point. Then we see that those both legs shaking, could be high levels of testosterone, could be high levels of adrenaline, could be medication of all kinds can do that. So there's a lot going on in this situation that we weren't seeing before. Lots of possibilities, lots of opportunities. We'll talk about those as we go through the other videos, but I'm interested what you guys have. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, Mark, I think you may be onto something about the neurodivergent piece, because what I've learned about people on the spectrum is they have a need to correct the record, and he does very carefully. If he makes a mistake about date, he fixes that date. If he talks about a knife, he's going to give you all the details. That's an interesting point. And he may not be able to read the room, might be the reason he's so glib. What's really good is that the interviewer is trying to do the best possible trust approach. You listen to him, he's paying attention to the guy, he's trying not to be judgmental. He's got this guy comfortable enough, not only to start telling him, but telling him the details. And the reason I think this kid is proud of what he's done, Chase, you said, one thing about him being maybe his biggest accomplishment, he's certainly proud of this. And you see his illustrators are big when he's talking about what he did behind the column. That kind of stuff. We'll see that drop off when it comes to him having to talk about himself. It's very different. And so I don't think he has the ability to think this quite the same way you do. This guy's got him talking really well. What's interesting is watching the investigator. The male investigator folds his hands and then moves in wooden fashion almost at, because this is awkward even for a guy who investigates murder to hear a guy talk this casually, I would think. The kid's really comfortable. The investigator's silent. And then he says, what? And after that, but watch the female over on the right. I can't tell you what's going on except for her feet are on fire. Look at that bleeding of nervous energy coming from her feet. Is it, I'm anxious, I want to ask a question? Is it, I can't believe how creepy this bastard is? We can't tell that. We've got one data point, but we can see her feet. Then we see this older guy, probably my age, with his knee bouncing, this investigator. That's an indicator that there's something going on. He needs to relieve a little bit of nervous energy too. The kid has that glib, again, smiling, big, bloody 12-inch knife. And he even spreads his legs and exposes his groin. That's not what we typically see with people who are insecure, which tells you not insecure about the topic. He's smiling and even joking about social distancing. You say this is nervous energy, is not. I think this guy just can't read the room. And that's where I was saying there's so much other stuff in here. I'm not going to grab everything. There's still 3 or 4 points I had listed. But Chase, what do you got?
I completely agree. And he's happy. He's energetic throughout this whole thing. And his attempt to gain rapport and this excitement about the story is unusual for his behavior even. He described himself earlier outside of this video as emotionless and neutral, and he's diagnosed with autism already. So what we're seeing is this in this initial clip is excitement, and more importantly, in my opinion, release. I think we're seeing release. There's a few cues here for sure that let us know he's socially attuned to what's going on. When he gets to the point about the bystander effect, there's a pause. He's pausing to check. They ensure they know that he's smart and educated on things. When he's talking about the more gruesome parts, which we had to cut out of the crime, this is the first long period of time where his legs stop bouncing from excitement. He's anchoring himself down so that he can gauge the response of the other people in the room. And when he does this, there's a calibration that takes place. He backs up. He apologizes for how morbid this description was. And I realize we can't show it here on YouTube, but this was probably because in interrogations, most interrogators will act like the crime is not a big deal, which could also explain why we're seeing such an energetic release while he's talking about everything. There's no huge reaction and judgment coming from across the table, which he may be used to being judged by all kinds of stuff. He's a kid. He's on the spectrum, probably got bullied through high school. One rule of thumb to remember is the more officers that are in the room, the less likely somebody is to confess. And I get it that we have a guy that's confessing here, but if you have multiple officers in the room, you're reducing your chances of confession. It's almost universal rule there. Is that everybody?
Well, I got that he was a high functioning, has a high functioning autism, paranoid schizophrenic, and psychopathy. Where did you guys get this thing about the autism that you know about it already?
Apparently he was previously diagnosed.
Yeah,
I mean, so do we know that? Because I just want to know if I'm right or not.
Level 1 autism, and they grade autism based on not how bad it is, but how much care is needed to provide for that person.
Right. So he's high functioning. That's why he's a 1. Okay, great.
Yep.
Nothing about schizophrenia, because I've got a paranoid schizophrenic.
Well, I'll come to that later on. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's more likely to be schizotypal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think. Well, I think we have very high end viewers, but I always try to keep it simple as possible, so I don't go into the typals.
That's right, viewers. Yeah.
Anyway,
Grade 1.
so for me in this thing, it looks like this is somebody who's not hiding anything at all.
Yeah.
He wants to tell this so bad he can't hardly stand it. And it reminds me the first time I watched this, it reminded me of somebody that's seen a UFO or something. They want to tell you exactly what happened, and they can't wait to get to the part. It's almost like you won't believe it. So that's the part that's gotten, it's not off-putting, but it's a little bit odd because he's telling you something that's just it's as odd as somebody telling you about a UFO story, but he's telling you about murdering somebody. And that's why I think those two things together, the way he's acting in the story, give me that feeling about sounds like a UFO story looks or used to look. These days, nobody cares. But that's what they used to look. They were like, you're not going to believe this, man. Here's what happened. That's the vibe I get from him. So he's in a normal conversational tone with that. His cadence, his voice tone, his volume, everything just seems normal for his baseline that we've gotten so far. He doesn't have any protection of his ego, as far as I can tell from the way he describes, well, other than the way he describes seeing that, being seen with a knife and a mask, because he kind of laughs about that because he knows that's odd, but I don't know if he knows the feeling that he's supposed to have for that. That's the thing. So, his demeanor is fairly normal, but it's just somebody telling a story. Hey, here's what happened. He can't get it out graphically. Well, he's graphic in some bits, but he can't get it out quick enough. He wants to help this guy with this because obviously the interrogator, like you always say, hey man, I'm here to help you. I'm trying to help you. Help me help you and all that. That's what he's trying to do. So it's really odd, but the autistic part of that, and then I'll leave it there on the psychiatric stuff. But the autistic part of that makes a lot of sense for me here. That's when I started thinking, that's what's going on. So, all right, we good?
This episode brought to you by the Department of Defense UAP program.
Somebody seen you?
Well,
Protecting you?
it was 11 p.m., so not many were driving by. Well, it was behind the pillar. So, like, here's the road.
Uh-huh.
It was here. So people would only see a brief thing here and here.
So, were you worried about them seeing you?
I was worried about one of them stopping. But
What did you think would happen if somebody...
Well, they looked, well, it was quite dark under there, so they wouldn't have seen the guy unless they looked. They would have seen me holding a bloody 12-inch knife, wearing gloves, and wearing a mask to conceal my identity, face mask.
Okay. So you weren't doing it for COVID, you were doing it to hide your face?
Partially. Social distancing. Right. Yeah, but no one stopped. And I'm just like, proves the bystander effect.
I noticed you got a cut on your hand. Is that from...
Oh, That was when I was doing gas, when I filled up. I mentioned I filled up gas when I was driving around.
Okay.
I was driving around, I was on a quarter of a tank, so I filled up on gas. What happened was, because I don't want to be seen in a gas station with a knife poking out of my pocket, I put it in the car, the back seat floor. When I'm done with it, I try and grab it, but my hand slips and grabs the blade, and as I pick it up, it slices these 2 fingers.
Okay.
Like,
Because a lot of times if you're stabbing like this, it'll slide.
no, and they had a guard. It was one of those knives that was
What
like,
is it?
huh? The
What
knife?
is it? Yeah.
My dad had it.
Okay.
He found it in my car. And then, let's see. Yeah. And then after that, I stripped his clothes. Because there's no prostitutes in Grand Junction, I don't think. Have you ever had any sex crimes?
Yeah. There's not prostitutes like 5 of them standing alongside the road, but there's prostitutes at Grand Junction.
Yeah, the plan was to go with one of them and have them come with me. And then the plan was to subdue them and tie them up and then torture her. That would have been sexual in nature. This was just to see what it felt like. But that would have been sexual.
So you thought about the sexual killing, but this one was just see what killing comes.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So what made you not go back to the same plan and get, if you kind of had that as a plan?
Would I have been caught?
Well, I don't know. My point is, if your folks, your mom found your stuff, right?
Yes.
And got rid of it. Why didn't you go back to that plan? Why change plans?
Too much risky. First time in a row, they'll be like, okay, that's really suspicious, but okay, we forgive you, don't do it again.
Okay.
Second time in a row, we're calling the police on you. I didn't want to do that again.
Okay, fair enough.
Risk.
And so they didn't call the police?
No, because I told they gave me an ultimatum, have them throw it all away or call the police. So I threw it all away because...
Okay, so you thought if you started rebuilding that plan, they'd find out?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's where this plan came from.
Okay, all right.
Not really a plan, it was improvised, kind of. Not really planning, just if...
Opportunity presented itself.
Yes, opportunity.
Yeah.
If the opportunity, then X.
Okay. If you had not been caught by your folks, what do you think you would have done next?
With the kid.
I don't know. No. Let's talk about like today. If you would have been able to get rid of the head, and your folks did not find it.
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Would you guys have been able to solve it if the body was down the river, the head and hands were missing, and there were no fingerprints or DNA?
Well, we'd like to think so, but who knows?
Right. Who knows? We'd love to think so, but
So
who
let's say
knows?
we didn't solve it. What happens next?
Then what would you have thought of to do?
All right, Chase, what do you got?
So he was born in March, and this is towards the very end of winter. And I thought this was fascinating just to share with you watching here. So there's this research from places like Cardiff University that suggests babies born in winter might face a lot of different health risks because moms are a lot more likely to get sick during those months. This can seriously mess with gene expression. Like it might change how stress hormones or the immune system works, potentially just affecting the kid's brain development. But even though there's studies like those from maybe Glasgow University have really shown a slight increase in mental health issues for winter babies. There's not a ton of hard evidence linking this to criminal behavior or anything like what Brian did here. It's way more complex than that. Genetics, upbringing, all the experiences in life play some massive roles too. But there's a massively interesting mix here of nervousness, a need to feel more in control with the adjustment of the water bottle, a few more grooming gestures, like when he bites his nails. I'm sure Greg's going to dig into that and have some metaphor about an animal in a dance floor. I don't know, whatever it is. But there's also several postural shifts when Sometimes he's not even grabbing his leg. And then towards the end of this, he's grabbing his leg, almost a little self-massage. There's also this a high confidence in the statements that he makes when he's saying the kit he put together for nights like that, when you can see his chin go up in this challenge. And all primates do this when they feel high confidence or challenged, exposing arteries. We see this in bar fights all the time. People like throwing their arms out like this, throwing their chin up. So this gesture exposes arteries on purpose, even though it's kind of unconscious. But the most interesting thing to me here is that I think about 80% of this excitement and openness is a result of him experiencing, maybe for the first time, another human being interested in him and wanting to know about him. And I think that's sad, no matter what he did. I mean, that's sad to see, if that is true. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, sad enough for him to just go on, though. I mean, this is a broken toy. There's no way around this being a broken toy. It's always interesting for me, Chase, when I hear things that talk about birth month of children. I want to say, did you juxtapose that across South America, Africa, where the seasons are tilted? It would be an interesting study to say, does the same thing play out in the winter months of those years?
The Cardiff University study does do that.
That doesn't. Good.
Yes.
Yeah. So I always want to know if they're doing that or not, or they just study people from Cardiff. So they'd say, okay, maybe it's a different problem. So those are good. Yeah, I agree with you. I think he is here feeling like he matters. And if you want to know when he feels like he matters, is when he's talking about the act. You ask him questions about self, watch that lockdown. I first thought, well, maybe, sometimes when you're on the spectrum, some of that constant movement is related to that. But then he grabs that ankle and starts that massage. That's a barrier. And to start with, I wasn't sure it was a barrier. And then there's actually a time when he locks down really tight and presses in his arms. And while we say, an absolutist would say crossing your arms it means you're closing somebody out. When you do that, it almost certainly means you're locking somebody out. Unless there's some other reason, like he's done something to comfort self in the past, there's some reason he's doing that. Watch when he barriers, when he leg crosses, anytime they're asking about feelings or thoughts. That gripping, and then listen to him fish when he says it was gradual, I think. He's looking for a response, trying to figure out what the guy wants. He really wants the opportunity to talk more about these details because he gets excited again. I think this is that place where he clarifies what kind of a knife and what his birthday was. More things that I've read or been told by people who have neurodivergent people or people on the spectrum that's a common thing. So I'm not going to assign anything to that other than the most action in his entire behavior is around when he talks about being told he had to throw away his kit. Look at him. Look at all the action. Look at all that adapting. He's really upset with his parents about having to throw away his murder kit. Interestingly, there's a guy we will eventually do on here named Israel Keyes. If you've never heard of him, Israel Keyes was a fairly prolific serial killer, ex-Army guy, ex-Army Ranger, who created these murder kits in 5-gallon buckets and buried them around the country. And we'll cover him. He's a creepy piece of work, too. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Yeah, again, on this one, his adapters are through the roof, man. I mean, the kid doesn't sit still more than 3 seconds. I don't think. We need to make sure I'm not muted still. He doesn't sit. I can't find a window of 3 seconds where he's still, 1, 2, 3, because he's always moving around. And I agree with you, Greg. I think the barriers we're seeing with his arms and his crossed leg, every time feelings come up, because he doesn't know what to think about that, because I'm under the impression so far this guy's a psychopath. It's hard to say. You can't diagnose one from watching him on a video, but if I had to bet, I'd put all my chips on. Yeah, I think that's what we're seeing here. But so there's a lot going on there with that, with those with his adapters and his barriering, all that stuff. And I think there's a lot happening neurologically here as well. I think his brain is just firing off these synapses, and that's what's making him move and jump around and stuff. Maybe because he's thinking a lot. Yeah, maybe the autistic part of it that's coming in. But I think there's a lot of thinking going on in there. I think he's saying things, but he's still tracking them. And you know how you'll say something, you'll think, oh, I should have said this, I could have said this. Is this wrong? Have I got to correct that? My structure on this? Those kind of things. And I think that's what's making him move around, because as he's thinking about those things, he sort of disengages, and that's why it's like Roseanne Barr's husband. What was his name? Remember the guy that couldn't sit still? Yeah, that guy, he couldn't sit still, man. And it was because he was on drugs at the time. But because when he's not on drugs, he didn't like that. He doesn't do that anymore. But I think that, and so it may be some kind of, like Mark was saying earlier, some kind of medication he's on to make him do that. But I think there's a lot going on in the brain with that behavior we're seeing. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so look, there are a lot of possible options going on here. I agree with everybody. Barriers suddenly come out of nowhere. Leg barrier, water barrier comes out there. He barriers with the crossed arms. He also protects fingers and wrist joints there as well. He starts massaging his foot, massaging the ankle joint. Very, very Prince Harry. That's a little tell that Harry will often do, of go down and massage his ankle joint when there's stress happening. Why? Why the stress? Why the stress now? It wasn't stressed before, talking about murdering people. It wasn't stressed before, just as you say there, Greg, I think, because they're all data questions. Where, who, what? And suddenly the questioning changes to, you're absolutely right, emotional ones. What in your mind has changed, for example? What in your mind has changed? Well, that's one, it's interesting that there's talk there about a change happening at a certain age. That can often point to schizoaffective disorders. We'll maybe come to those a little bit later on. So there's a data point. But what in your mind has changed, I don't know. And there's a change in his tone there as well. There's an overly dramatic change in tone. And his fist comes in and you can hear it on his cheek there. So you've got another two elements on that out of nowhere. So does he not know? Or maybe he does know, or maybe nothing changed. But certainly there's a protection of honesty around, I would say, the internal landscape. What's going on for him in his mind? He's protecting that. Was it gradual? And then again, that change of tone, gradual in a very sinister, overly dramatic way. Again, out of his usual baseline. So he's repeating the words said before. That can often happen in ASD as well. So it could be that, or it could be an act. Are these things of I don't know and gradual change, are those an act? Because they're both out of his easygoing baseline around data questions. But now he's got into the emotional internal landscape. There's a real problem for him around that. Scott, to your point, is it that he just doesn't know? Does he not know? Does he actually know? What's going on here? There's some big differences happening here. Now, I will just end this by saying, look, when we talk about ASD or schizoaffective disorders or psychopathy, we're not saying all people with that, because the reality is that most everybody you find with any of those things, or even any combination of those things, will not commit violent crime. It's a small percentage of people who have any of those things, or potentially all of those things, who will commit or get to commit a violent crime. So we're by no means being pejorative when we put him into those buckets. There, that's all I got on this one. Let's have a look at another.
Don't boss me, Mark. I'll be the one that tells us we'll have a look at another.
Was that two?
I don't know.
That was a two. That was two.
Yeah, it was two. Here comes three. I've committed to this.
It's the third video, but it's number two. Yeah.
Because there's no prostitutes in Grand Junction, I would think. Have you ever had any sex crimes?
Yeah. There's not prostitutes like 5 of them standing alongside the road, but there's prostitutes at Grand Junction.
Yeah, the plan was to go with one of them and have them come with me. And then the plan was to subdue them and tie them up and then torture her. that would have been sexual in nature. This was just to see what it felt like. But that would have been sexual.
So you thought about the sexual killing, but this one was just see what killing felt.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So what made you not go back to the same plan and get, if you kind of had that as a plan?
Would I have been caught?
Well, I don't know. My point is, if your folks, your mom found your stuff, right?
Yes.
And got rid of it. Why didn't you go back to that plan? Why change plans?
Too much risky. First time in a row, they'll be like, okay, that's really suspicious, but okay, we forgive you, don't do it again.
Okay.
Second time in a row, we're calling the police on you. I didn't want to do that again.
Okay, fair enough.
Risk.
And so they didn't call the police?
No, because I told they gave me an ultimatum, have them throw it all away or call the police. So I threw it all away because...
Okay, so you thought if you started rebuilding that plan, they'd find out?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's where this plan came from.
Okay, all right.
Not really a plan, it was improvised, kind of. Not really planning, just if...
Opportunity presented itself.
Yes, opportunity.
Yeah.
If the opportunity, then X.
Okay. If you had not been caught by your folks, what do you think you would have done next?
With the kid.
I don't know. With it. No. Let's talk about like today. If you would have been able to get rid of the head, and your folks did not find it.
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Would you guys have been able to solve it if the body was down the river, the head and hands were missing, and there were no fingerprints or DNA?
Well, we'd like to think so, but who knows?
Right. Who knows? We'd love to think so, but
So
who
let's say
knows?
we didn't solve it. What happens next?
Then what would you have thought of to do?
So, to see what it felt like. What did it feel like?
It was intense. It was a rush of adrenaline.
Okay.
My whole body was shaking. Not like out of fear. It was like...
So you ever had that feeling before?
Yes.
When?
It was years ago. Well, no, actually, it wasn't. It was occasionally my thoughts get the better of me, and sometimes I don't know how to describe it. It isn't a panic attack. It's anything like that. I'll give you an example. I was watching a video when all of a sudden I start going into existential thoughts. I get the feeling, I know that it isn't, but I get the feeling that there are eyes on the walls watching me, eyes on the furniture. And I cover myself up. I'm like, oh God, eyes. And I'm worried if I stick anything out from the bed, blades will come up and chop it off. And I don't know. I know that's not going to happen, but I'm worried about that.
Okay.
So then my whole body was shaking up and down.
So it's like a fear adrenaline? Is that what you had with the eyes?
Not really fear. It was a thought that bothered me.
And then killing the guy was the same?
It wasn't fear. It was just pure, what's the word?
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Well, I don't know, but you know how it goes. When you're a T-Rex, you can't do but so much. Watch his hands when he's talking about there are no prostitutes in Grand Junction, which clearly is not true. But as he's doing that, I think he is distancing from this being sexual. I don't know that he even probably can put the right words to what he's thinking. I'm not sure I believe him about being this non-sexual. He covers up his body. Again, anything about feelings, he's locking himself up. But when he gets back to the actual accomplishment, his hands and his arms and his body start moving and open. And to your point, you always bring up, Chase, about Scott, about Vray's study, about big gestures, big illustrators. They come up. Every time that you see him closing up, it's about disappointment at his failure. Anytime he didn't accomplish something he was trying to do, he closes back up. Chase, this goes back to something you said earlier. This might be his only accomplishment in life and big enough. And I've said to you before, I talked to a guy one time, a long time ago, who said, why'd you do this? He said, could have stayed in my little village and been nobody, or I could do this and be somebody. Sometimes that's all it takes for people. And if you look at this whole thing, they aren't asking him what he would have done next because they want to know. They're asking him because they want to know, has he done it before and he's hiding something? That's the only reason they're asking that. They don't care what this guy would have done. They're just, if he gives them a pattern, they can see a pattern, they can go look at open cases and say, this is probably this guy, and tie it back to him. I have very little belief they want to know what he would have done next. They want him out of there. They want to get, all they're doing is getting enough information for prosecution. They already have a confession. They're getting enough information for prosecution so they'll know whether it was intentional, you planned it, he's mental. There's all kinds of stuff they want to know, and everything they're collecting is valuable. This is like an intelligence interrogation in that, okay, I know you did it. Give me as much information about everything else you know as you can before I push you back into the cell. Very different from trying to get a confession. He's already gotten it. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree, Greg. And that they've got him into that state of relaxation, that they can take him into that future, that's really spectacular. They're doing an amazing job to relax him, that he will start to, be relaxed about the potential of talking about crimes that could have happened. But I agree, they're not interested in, that doesn't stand up in court. But brilliant that they've got him there. Since you mentioned it, Greg, it's interesting that he tries to steer around the potential of it being there being sexual crimes. Now, is that because, he's concerned about that from a moral point of view, or he's still childlike? Or is it that he's smart enough to know that if it's tied into some kind of sex crime, that puts him in a different category in a prison, not with other prisoners, a different category with other prisoners and different treatment that he's most likely to get. Certainly that would be the case for a UK prison. If you're in there as what they would call a nonce, which means you're not on the usual ground, you're not let out with everybody else because you're gonna get a lot of treatment from people. If he knows that, he'd want to steer away from that. So is he smarter than we think? Possible, possibly not. Don't know at this point. It's possible.
Mark, do I have it right? Is nonce not on normal communal exercise?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, which means, yes, just as you say, you're not going to be allowed to be communally outside with others because, you're going to get yourself into trouble. You're going to get damaged. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I really wanted to make this one interesting. So I consulted a couple people. The first person was one of my instructors that works for NCI, and she is a forensic psychology expert. So I just gave her this one clip and said, what would a forensic psychology person say about all this stuff? The second person I consulted was Al from Tool Time in Home Improvement. And the only thing he told me was to ask Greg for his shirt back. So
I don't like this either, Greg. It reminds me of the time we saw Mark wearing a T-shirt. Remember that? I still think about that sometimes.
It's 40 degrees and I'm outside with a sick horse. This is what you get.
Was that Orvis? Where's that shirt from?
That's Orvis. I don't know what Orvis is.
Okay. I'm just trying to decide where it's from.
So let me break this down from the forensic psychiatry standpoint here. Got a couple of points that are pretty interesting that I would have never come up with. So there's a lot happening here. The first one is premeditation. There was an evolving, broader fantasy, and it's a fantasy that looks like it had initial limbs and branches that started developing, and it would continue to develop if this would have continued. The next is motive. So he distinguishes the difference between his motives. He's aware, consciously aware of the impulses and the differences in those two different impulses, which is going in court that helps to solidify this person's not crazy. And then we have family. So after his parents found this kit thing that he put together, He assessed the risk individually and thought strategically to avoid detection. I'm going to act a certain way to avoid being detected, which shows some smartness. Next is control and manipulation. So his choice to control and maybe comply with his parents shows us his understanding of social consequences and maybe social manipulation so that he could continue this behavior. And the next is scenario questions. He's actively seeking some information about whether the police could have solved the crime. And this could maybe represent some fascination with crime solving and an attempt to understand his chances of evasion in the future, some contemplation of that stuff. There's a total absence of empathy and remorse here. He admits to these future intentions to continue his behavior, making it a serial crime. And this is probably why they're asking the question. So from this forensic psychologist, they're probably asking the question so that a court can say, he said that he intended to do this, he would be doing this. And so that's probably why they nailed him down for that. Something I picked up on as well. Scott, what do you got?
All right. This video shows definitively that he is absent of any empathy whatsoever for anybody or anything. He doesn't even understand what it's like to feel empathy for anything or anyone. Earlier, he talked about killing a cat. And he's talking about, like you guys were talking about, his fantasies of killing a person. And this is classic psychopathy right here. I absolutely love this. Mark's growing a beard. And so I always get on my soapbox about how psychopaths aren't always these brilliant, clever, guys in suits or, or they'll be a crazy looking guy and they're really smart. This is one of those situations where the guy's really not this smart. Then you have psychopaths who are brilliant and who are clever and who are smart, and some that are creepy and some that are just doofuses, And this is it looks like a kid whose brain isn't functioning properly. So there are different styles and types of psychopaths, like there are different styles and types of normal old people. So keep that in mind as you watch this, because a lot of people are going to be saying, well, he doesn't act like a psychopath. Well, he sure as shit did. In this, anyway, in his behavior here, he sure did and sure continues to with everything he's showing us and everything he's saying. Not everything, but you know what I mean? When he describes things, he doesn't understand feelings. As we go forward in this, pay attention to how he talks about feelings, the way he reacts when those questions about having a feeling about something, anything comes up, because he doesn't have any. He just feels the rush of things. He just feels excitement from doing things, which is, again, classic psychopathy.
So, to see what it felt like, what did it feel like?
It was intense. It was a rush of adrenaline.
Okay.
My whole body was shaking. Not like out of fear. It was like...
So you ever had that feeling before?
Yes.
When?
Yeah. It was years ago. Well, no, actually, it wasn't. It was occasionally my thoughts get the better of me, and sometimes I don't know how to describe it. It isn't a panic attack. It's anything like that. I'll give you an example. I was watching a video when all of a sudden I start going into that sense of thoughts. I get the feeling, I know that it isn't, but I get the feeling that there are eyes on the walls watching me, eyes on the furniture. And I cover myself up. I'm like, oh God, eyes. And I'm worried if I stick anything out from the bed, blades will come up and chop it off. And I don't know. I know that's not going to happen, but I'm worried about that.
Okay.
So then my whole body was shaking up and down.
So it's like a fear adrenaline? Is that what you have with the eyes?
Not really fear. It was a thought that bothered me.
And then killing the guy was the same?
It wasn't fear. It was just pure, what's the word? decomposed. Not excitement as in joy, just excitement as in increased heartbeat, sweating, that type of thing.
Like an adrenaline gel.
Yeah. Although I wasn't breaking the sweat killing the guy, it was quite easy.
Well, did you enjoy it or not enjoy it?
Did I enjoy it? I don't know. Sort of neutral on the whole thing. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't hate it.
So I'm curious about the Detachment taking parts of him home. Have you ever thought about? Well, it sounds like you've had like the Ted Bundy sex type stuff. The Ed Kemper just kill people because you want to kill somebody. Plus the sex stuff. How about Jeffrey Dahmer?
It wasn't really inspired by it. It was just more.
I'm just trying to think of all the people like
These people can do it, so can I. Can I use the restroom?
Absolutely.
I'll let you do that. I'll wait here.
Okay, you wait here. I'll walk this way. Lost doors. What else? So, clearly we know what you did, right?
Yeah.
And you're here to help me. What else can you tell me? Not only help me with your case, which the more you can tell me about that, the better to help me. But like maybe somebody else is in school now or to help catch somebody else. Well, I mean, I don't know what's in your brain, and I never will unless you tell me what's in your brain.
Chase, you're smiling. Why don't you go first?
There's a couple of things going on here. Let's talk about them. I don't know why my microphone's up in my face like that.
I do.
The first thing is something called alexithymia. So this is common in people with autism or ADHD where there's trouble identifying and describing emotions. Then we have a unique type of paranoia. And this is a form of paranoia where he feels observed or threatened by environment. This is a unique thing with people that, more typically with people that are thinking about doing that to other people, feel that their environment is also observing those negative thoughts and capable of inflicting the same amount of damage. This is pretty well researched. But when he's talking about shaking, what he's referring to is something called neurogenic tremors. And they're your body's natural way of shaking off stress or trauma, like an involuntary reset button for the nervous system. And it's very similar to how animals will shake off fear. You'll see them literally tremoring and vibrating. And when Brian described his whole body shaking from that adrenaline rush after maybe that fear, it might have been a form of these tremors. It was body's way of processing these emotions or stress. And these tremors aren't just physical. They're linked to psychological stress, especially in dealing with conditions like ADHD or autism where sensory overload is likely to happen, especially in stuff like this. In therapy, there's something called trauma releasing exercises, which was named or coined by Dr. David Berceli. These tremors are harnessed on purpose to help release some chronic stress and trauma. But if they're frequent, without context, it might signal some ongoing unresolved stress. I would encourage you to look up TRE and Dr. Berceli. I've published medical papers on this. If you're interested, you can find them online on academia and stuff like that. Just type in my name with neurogenic tremors. And
Let's put them in the PDF. Put the thing in the PDF that will at the end of this.
Yeah. We'll throw them in the PDF.
Yeah, because at the end of this episode, we'll have a PDF you can download.
Good idea.
Throw them in there. Mark, what do you got?
Look, here we've got a simple feeling question. What did it feel like? And he's unable to really answer that. And I think for all the potential reasons that we've come up with, there are numerous potential reasons why he's not able or will not name the feeling. And it could be one or it could be all of those at the same time. Now, what he does describe, though, it's interesting, those eyes, because it's quite extreme. It's not just the eyes watching him, it's the eyes on the walls watching the eyes on the furniture. So it's the eyes watching the eyes, which is, I've spent some time with people in psychotic states, and the eyes is that's quite classic. The eyes watching the eyes.
Or like for ayahuasca, that's pretty.
Yeah, the eyes watching the eyes is like, wow, that's a new one on me. So he is describing what some, and certainly I would go, okay, that sounds like you're in a psychotic state, if that's the case, and these tremors are part of that psychotic state. Now, there's also some meds that can give you those kinds of states. There's some antipsychotic meds that will give you quite psychotic states. So there's all kinds of reasons why this might be happening. But it is extraordinary, the eyes watching the eyes. And so something in me goes, hang on, have you taken this one too far? Are you pushing this one too far? Is this one an act? Have you taken the idea of the eyes and you've pushed it to an extreme because you've realized you may need at some point to go for insanity, because that might be a better sentence? Or certainly a trip to an institution that wouldn't be as well. You'll be on those psychotic meds, which will make you psychotic. But anyway, look, there is a possibility of schizoaffective disorders, psychosis. So we've just got even more to choose from there, along with he could be smart enough to be giving us a story around this, because the eyes watching the eyes for me is a little bit too extreme, but it's possible. Scott, what do you got on this one?
All right. I think he's describing the reasons to a T why he's a psychopath. And here, as he's talking about all this, psychopaths, the reason they do these things that are so outlandish, or they'll, for example, there was a doctor who was, his brain was a psychopath's brain, but he wasn't doing anything bad or evil or anything else. But he would take his family on these trips where they would go to these whitewater things, and he'd like be holding the baby or one of his kids as they were doing it, because he didn't he didn't care about their safety. He just did it for the rush of doing it. This kid's doing this stuff for the feeling it gives him, because he has no other feelings. It's that rush he gets. And I think that it's the adrenaline that's as he relives that, that's making him shaky and giving him those little tremors and things. I think as he relives that, he gets that rush again. That's why that's why a lot of times they'll take something from the scene, be it a body part or a piece of clothing, something like that, because they can relive it and get that feeling again. So I'll check to see if I was muted. Yeah. Hands in head. Wow. So I think that's a lot of what's happening there. And the first time we really see discomfort is when he starts asking him about the feelings he had about that. How do you feel? What did you feel about that? That's when we're seeing him become uncomfortable, So because he doesn't know what feelings are, he doesn't understand what he felt because he didn't feel anything. He's searching for those things he's supposed to have. He doesn't understand that he doesn't have that. This hasn't been explained to him yet. He hasn't learned about psychopathy. He doesn't know what's wrong with him. Maybe nobody does up to this point. They do now. Up to that point, they didn't. But this is a classic case of seeing that on somebody when for the first time, you're saying, wow, look at this. Because when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, there's no question about it now. For me, anyway. But as well, I think the thing with the eyes and all that stuff, the stuff under the bed and all that, that's paranoid schizophrenia. I mean, that's what I think we're dealing with there is going back to the schizotypal situation that he's in. I think he's paranoid schizophrenic. And the eyes that are watching eyes, I missed that part. I didn't even see that. I guess I was too excited with the other stuff, but I didn't hear that part. But that's what I think he's talking about, because he doesn't feel fear. He doesn't have fear in there anywhere either. He has no feelings whatsoever. So then again, that's why he has no empathy for anyone as well. But during all of this, as you watch this again, check out the interrogator. He's getting excited, man, because he's like, wow, this is, there it is. I'm seeing all this that we're all talking about on here, because he starts playing with his fingers. He starts scooting around. You see his breathing rate increases a little bit there, so he's getting excited as he's seeing all this, and he knows it's at this point it's a slam dunk. I mean, there's no question that the kid's already admitted to what he's done. But I just think it's interesting to watch the third parties in the room watching that happen and watching their reactions to it. I'm sure ours might have been similar too, as we were watching for the first time, getting a little bit excited as well. I know I was, because I was like, wow, this kid's, there it is. So I'm Joey.
And as it should, quite often you'll hear those specific words and phrases.
I still haven't gone, Scott, just so you know.
Oh, shoot. Dang, but a good ending there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this guy's about half full of shit. Mark, I agree with you. I don't think, if you look at everything else he says, this is an orphaned condition. The only time he talks about anything that's odd, anything that's unusual, is when he talks about these eyes. Everything, and the blades coming out from under the bed and all that kind of stuff. I think what he's trying to describe, and he doesn't have words to describe feelings, is we've all been through a really high adrenaline rush. And then when your sympathetic and parasympathetic are fighting and your brain first comes back online, your hands are jittery, we all know that feeling. This guy's not a normal human being who has normal ways of describing. And Mark, I think you may be right. He's probably smart enough to realize he can use some outlandish thing rather than say, hey, it was just so exciting. I enjoyed it so much that when I came to, my hands were shaking. If he says that, it sounds a lot like, yeah, you're going to get locked up forever. What we don't show in this series, we'll see it again next time, is he says, I'm going to get 15 years for this, right? Well, you're almost right. Life plus 13. That's close enough. But this guy, I think what we're seeing here is he's just explaining what we've all been through. But see him again, open up when he starts talking about his accomplishment. See him close up when he's talking about failures or any of those kinds of things. This is just, for me, more of the same, but he's got that glib, slick, giant illustration when he's talking about this wide open body language. And the only time that I've seen any real emotional accessing is when he's talking about this blades and panic and that kind of thing. So I think he's about half full of shit. I don't think it's anything grand.
Burning it up, Chase.
That's why you're the award winner.
Yeah, that's when you get that shit.
Not excitement as in joy, just excitement as in increased heartbeat, sweating, that type of thing.
Like a adrenaline gel.
Yeah. Although I wasn't breaking the sweat killing the guy, it was quite easy.
Well, did you enjoy it or not enjoy it?
Did I enjoy it? I don't know. Sort of neutral on the whole thing. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't hate it.
So, I'm curious about the cutting him off, taking parts of him home. Have you ever thought about, well, it sounds like you've had like the Ted Bundy sex type stuff. The Ed Kemper just kill people because you want to kill somebody. Plus the sex stuff. How about Jeffrey Dahmer?
It wasn't really inspired by it. It was just more,
I'm just trying to think of all the people
like, these people can do it, so can I. Can I use the restroom?
Absolutely.
I'll let you do that.
Oh, wait here. Okay, you wait here. I'll walk this way. Lots of doors. What else? So, clearly we know what you did, right?
Yeah.
And you're here to help me. What else can you tell me? Not only help me with Interrogation, which the more you can tell me about that, the better to help me. But like maybe somebody else is in school now or to help catch somebody else. Well, I mean, I don't know what's in your brain, and I never will unless you tell me what's in your brain.
I was suicidal, I want to say, 2 years ago.
Okay.
And let's see. I had expressed thoughts of killing myself to my therapist, Brett. And he said if I ever felt like that they would go into crisis mode. And I did feel like that eventually. So I was taken to Mind Springs and offered, what was it, like a stay for like 8 days.
Okay.
Or I could go back home, and I chose the back home option.
Okay. And evidently you okay, so.
Yeah.
How about anything else about killing people or your planning or, I mean, how long, it sounds like for quite a while you've been driving around thinking about it. That's how often you drive around.
A week, every 2 weeks.
For how long?
Oh, I want to say 2 months.
Okay.
I was caught doing it before, and so they didn't let me go anywhere really.
Who caught you?
My parents.
Oh, okay.
My parents caught me. They didn't really want me going anywhere,
Okay.
so I didn't do that for a while. Then about 2 months ago, maybe 3, I started doing it again.
When did they catch you?
Yeah, was with the kid.
Oh, okay.
They didn't.
So you were driving around with the kid?
No, actually, I was walking around with the kid.
Okay.
Oh, well, actually, I was driving, but I had the kid. Went out, searched a couple places, trying to walking around with the backpack and the kid. The backpack had the most stuff in it.
Okay.
The kid, just trying to look for someone. They caught me when I went back inside. My parents caught me. They didn't check the kid, the backpack. But they were like, "What are you doing out?" And I'm like, "I'm getting a breath of fresh air." And they're like, "Okay." But
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, this one. There's a self-reflective question. Did you enjoy it? And he makes all the right moves. You know, things, eyes kind of go, well, there's enough of a break in baseline that it's the act of looking like you're thinking, and thinking emotionally, but he doesn't come up with anything. Now, again, as to why he doesn't come up with that, there could be multiple reasons. It could be one of those multiple reasons, or it could be all of them together. What I like most about this is not just this act of being emotional, but then he wants to go to the bathroom and pretty much he just gets up and leaves. He just gets up and leaves. He opens the door, he lets himself out. And that speaks to what you said right at the start, Greg, which is he's not good at reading the room. Well, either he's not good at reading the room and knowing, like, you probably shouldn't just leave on your own. Like, you're there. I assume at this point, he's absolutely arrested. He's not, detained in any way, or he's totally arrested on a crime at this point. So I've never seen anybody just go, "I'd like to go to the bathroom." "Yeah, of course you can." Up he goes, door, and out he goes. And the interrogator's following him, like, "Oh, okay, mate." The other one's there going, I'll leave you to it. It's like, so either he can't read the situation, or he does like to take control of the situation, and he is going to take control of it, or both of those things, maybe, or something else. Or all of those things and something else. I don't know which one it is, but certainly it's some of the oddest behavior that I've seen, and really speaks potentially to the convergence of issues that are possibly going on for him. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, when he's asked if he enjoyed the killing, you see that long pause because he's trying to decide what enjoyment is. He's searching for that feeling, quote unquote, because he doesn't know what enjoyment is. He doesn't know if he enjoyed it or not, and says so because he can't, because neurologically he's not functioning properly. A lot goes on with psychopathy. You can always talk about the amygdala, how it's not working properly and all that. But there's so many other things that happen in there as well. To keep it simple, I go to that. There's so much going on there where you're dealing with the autism and the schizophrenic side of it, all those things. That's just a mess up there. So it makes a lot of sense. But he says, "I don't know," when he asks him that, because he doesn't know. He doesn't know what that feeling is. And that long pause is why is when he's searching for that. They really think that's what's happening there. So he doesn't show any residual remorse for anything. He doesn't show any sadness or any, when he talks about the things that would cause pain to the guy that he killed, nothing on his face that shows that he would identify with that, because he can't. Because he's a psychopath. I really think so. I mean, like I always say, you can't just diagnose one from a video, but boy, if you were ever asked to, this would be the one you could use as an example. This is a great example of one. It's perfect. Chase, what do you got?
So I'm going to go at this from a different angle here. The interrogator uses a phrase here, and he says, "You're here to help me." I think this is a beautiful phrase. And in the interrogation world, we would call this role assignment. And it's a technique where the interviewer redefines the context or the roles of the suspect to elicit a little more cooperation and information. And let me go into how this works and why it's powerful, because I think it's fascinating. So first, it reframes the interaction. Just by saying, "You're here to help me," the interrogator is shifting this dynamic from adversarial or confrontational to a cooperative one. It positions the suspect not as somebody in trouble, but as somebody who has a role to play in helping out, lowers defenses and all that. There's a mutual benefit to it as well. So the statement just implies a mutual goal. We're sharing a goal together. You're not just here for us to question you, but for you to contribute. There's a shared objective here, like solving a case or understanding the situation better. And it's effective because there's psychological comfort embedded in that. It creates this environment where the interviewee, the suspect, feels less likely to be under attack. There's reciprocity. We all human beings respond to kindness most of the time with other kindness or assistance. There's an identity shift too there. And people act in accordance with the roles that they're assigned. And it reduces that resistance because of that. There's a joint effort going on. And there's empowerment there, maybe to a degree. It gives that suspect a sense of control or importance. And in therapy or counseling, therapists use a version of role assignment like this to help their patients see themselves as active participants in this healing process instead of just some passive recipient of treatment. And it's very effective to shift that. And even in hostage negotiations or business negotiations, let's do business, or maybe diplomatic settings, just redefining roles can help move from a win-lose scenario to a win-win, where both parties are feeling like they have some kind of common goal. So it's a good technique, but it has to be used at the right time and only once or twice. If you keep reaffirming that stuff, the power just disappears over time. That's all I got. Scott, what do you got?
Right, I already went.
And Greg.
Yeah. So one of the more interesting things here is I think something entirely different, Scott, than him just being a flat out psychopath. I don't know what he is. He's a mix of God knows what inside the head, whatever it took to create this horrible thing that he's done. But I think he's more worried about this guy's opinion of him than he was when he sat down. And the reason I say that is when he asked him, "Did you enjoy it?" I think you're right. He probably doesn't know exactly what to say, but he certainly, if he's mimicking, he does a good job of disgust, wrinkling his nose, repeats the question, does some emotional eye accessing, and then retreats, pulls his eyes back up into some visual where the recall are creative, and sits for a minute as he's trying to decide. And then he soft sells the joy. He doesn't say, "Yeah, I enjoyed it," because he's afraid of how this guy will perceive it, I think. And he says, "I didn't love it. I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't hate it." That's soft selling what he's doing. That's less stress when he says those words than when he was talking about somebody taking his murder kit from him. And he's even more comfortable talking about being like one of the worst killers in America. Gein, Bundy. There's a list of killers. Who's the other guy? Kemper. He's even more comfortable talking about that than he was when he was losing his toys. His hands, his movement, all that stuff is really big. I don't know exactly, but the reason I think he has some kind of connection to this guy now and he's afraid of how it would be perceived is watch when he comes back in the room and they stand there and the detective is standing over him. Watch that leg jiggle go through the roof. And I think that may have to do with authority or with somebody standing over him, that kind of thing. I would take advantage of that because if I knew that was the case, I would do pressure and release, pressure and release, pressure and release in an interrogation. I'd have him stand and somebody else come in and say, "Hey, why don't you move out of the way?" and see if that same thing happened. So Yeah, I don't know. This is certainly a mess, whether he's a full-blown psychopath, a psychopath with some other tendencies, or all those things together, who knows?
Is that what you think, or is that the shirt talking?
That's the shirt talking.
Okay, just making sure.
Let that Old Spice get to your head.
Can you see my little ding over my head?
No. What
I'm
happened?
good. I had a pair of glasses on. I was trying to put something in this horse's eye, and they don't like it a lot of times. He slung his head and slammed these glasses up and gave me a little abrasion.
Oh, man.
Poor guy. You know, he scratched his eyes, so it's not a good thing.
I was suicidal, I want to say, 2 years ago.
Okay.
And let's see. I had expressed thoughts of killing myself to my therapist, Brett. And he said if I ever felt like that means they would go into crisis mode. And I did feel like that eventually. So I was taken to Mind Springs and offered, what was it, like a stay for like 8 days.
Okay.
Or I could go back home, and I chose the back home option.
Okay. And evidently you didn't care, so.
Yeah.
How about anything else about killing people or your planning or, I mean, how long, it sounds like for quite a while you've been driving around thinking about it. That's how often you drive around.
A week, every 2 weeks.
For how long?
Oh, once every 2 months.
Okay.
I was caught doing it before, and so they didn't let me go anywhere really.
Okay.
My parents.
Okay.
My parents caught me. They didn't really want me going anywhere,
Okay.
so I didn't do that for a while. Then about 2 months ago, maybe 3, I started doing it again.
When did they catch you?
I guess was with the kid.
Oh, okay.
They didn't.
So you were driving around with the kid?
No, actually, I was walking around with the kid.
Okay.
Oh, well, actually, I was driving, but I had the kid. Went out, searched a couple of places, trying to walking around with the backpack and the kid. The backpack had the most stuff in it.
Okay.
The kid, just trying to look for someone. But they caught me when I went back inside. My parents caught me. They didn't check the kid, the backpack. But they were like, "What are you doing out?" And I'm like, "I'm getting a breath of fresh air." And they're like, "Okay." But
What are your overall thoughts on this, Mark? What have you seen so far?
Yeah. Okay. So potentially ASD, neurodivergent, probable, possible. Antisocial personality disorder, psychopathic, possible, probable. Schizoaffective disorder, possible. Is that one probable? I don't know. That one I'm feeling a little less because of the eyes stuff. I'm feeling a little less on that one. Still very, very possible. And it's probable. Is it one of those things? Is it all three of those things? Is it something else that I haven't mentioned? I mean, put other opportunities down below and your argument for it. I'm interested in seeing more film of this guy because I'd be interested, does one of those options under certain situations start to drop out and drop away? He's managed to give me the possibility and probability of 3 very extreme things all at once. Now, that could be true, but if it is true, it should hold true in every situation that he's in. Will a context mean that he can't sustain 3 acts or more all at the same time? I'm interested for more. Chase, what are you seeing so far?
What a load of bullshit. I'm kidding. I agree. And people can show traits like charm, a lack of empathy, taking risks without being actual psychopaths. These behaviors might pop up because of the situation, just how personalities vary, or because they're kind of useful in certain jobs like life stuff, cultural expectations, or other mental health crazy stuff can also make somebody seem like a psychopath when they're not. Not disagreeing with Scott here, but I want to just take this opportunity to say that, but we as a society, we tend to slap psychopath or narcissist or whatever on people so fast because it feels like if I can do that, I can understand it. I can control what's going on. And the truth is, these labels do jack shit to actually help us, but they help us to oversimplify things. They can unfairly judge people, and we might miss out on the whole picture of a human being. Real psychopathy assessments, as Scott will say, not that any of what I'm saying Scott will disagree with, but that stuff takes a bunch of consistent time with people and all that stuff, not just a couple of videos on the internet. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I love this one because we get an example of glib. Is he glib because he's a psychopath, or is he just glib? Don't know.
What
I
if
would
you
also
ask
say, Chase, are you glib? Chase, I would say the world you and I come from, operations folks, you learn to be glib about some pretty horrific things because that's the way we talk to each other. And that can be confusing for people. This kid didn't learn that way. This kid did some pretty messed up stuff. And whatever it took to get him here, I'm a big fan of, yeah, okay, he might be a psychopath, he might be a this, he might be a that. It's not what you get, it's what you do with what you get. Lots of psychopaths are going to live the way they live and just be functioning members of society. And occasionally there's somebody who you can't put a label on who is, I always say, we're like a pearl. We just keep laying down code after code after code of stuff on there. If there's a fracture somewhere deep, it comes to the surface. Sometimes it's not a psychopath. Sometimes it's not a this. And Chase, agree with you. It's real easy to label somebody Frankenstein's monster rather than wonder how the boy next door did something so horrific. This is a great example, and we're halfway through this one. Wait till you see some of this next stuff. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. Everything y'all said makes sense, especially the part about you can't tell just by watching videos whether somebody's a psychopath or not. It takes sometimes a year to be able to diagnose someone properly. You know, you've got the hair psychopathy test, and that's where you start. But you have to know how to administer that properly. You know, so and if that's done wrong, it's just part of the diagnosis anyway. So I really like this one, and I'm so glad we have a whole other episode to do on this as well, so we can get in even deeper. I am under the impression, even though I'm all the time preaching you can't call one that soon, I'm under the impression we're dealing with psychopathy here because it appears to be so blatant from my perspective anyway. So, but that's not all that's going on from a psychiatric point of view. I think we're still dealing with 2 or 3 other things as well. You know, the schizophrenia and the autism there. So, and those two together can make you look, you know, a little psychopathic as well, especially with the autism part. Not that autistic people who have autism are psychopathic or anything like that. Don't get in the comments and start saying that. It's not going to work. But, yeah.
If you do, about Scott.
Yeah, come at me, bro. So, you know, it takes a while to diagnose one. All right, fellas, I think this is a good one, and I'll see you next time.